Have you ever noticed how some people seem to unravel right at the threshold of achievement? They work towards something for months, sometimes years. They develop the skills, build the relationships, position themselves perfectly. Then in those final crucial weeks, something shifts. They become inconsistent. They create problems that didn't exist before. They arrive at the moment they've been preparing for and somehow become a different version of themselves. It's not laziness. It's not lack of discipline. It's something far more interesting. What you're witnessing is the psyche's self-protective mechanism turning against the very success it helped create. And understanding it changes everything. Consider someone who's been working towards starting their own business. They've saved money for 2 years. They've researched their market thoroughly. They've built a detailed business plan that accounts for every reasonable obstacle. The moment finally arrives when they have enough capital, enough preparation, enough support. They set a launch date. Then, in the month before launch, they begin doubting the entire concept, not with rational concerns, but with catastrophic thinking. They imagine failure scenarios that have nothing to do with their actual business model. They start researching completely different business ideas. They tell themselves they need to save just a bit more money, do just a bit more research. The launch date passes, then another one. The business remains an idea that never materializes. On the surface, this appears to be fear of failure or perfectionism, but psychology reveals something deeper. This person's psyche is generating interference because success represents a fundamental threat to their existing identity. Notice how this shows up differently for someone else. They've been offered a promotion that requires relocating to a new city. It's everything they've said they wanted. Better position, higher salary, more autonomy. The offer comes through. Instead of feeling excited, they become obsessed with everything that could go wrong. They research crime statistics in the new city. They calculate cost of living increases down to the dollar. They suddenly remember how much they love their current neighborhood. They're not being thorough. They're looking for evidence to justify staying exactly where they are. Or think about this. Someone decides to get serious about their health. They join a gym, hire a trainer, adjust their schedule. For 3 weeks, they're consistent. They start seeing results. People notice. They comment positively. Then suddenly, they're tired all the time. They develop minor ailments that make training difficult. They accept social invitations that conflict with gym time. Within a month, they're back to their previous patterns, telling themselves they'll start again when life settles down. The psyche wasn't sabotaging the goal. It was protecting something more fundamental, the familiar sense of self. Here's what's particularly revealing. These patterns often intensify right at the threshold, not at the beginning, when enthusiasm is high, not in the middle, when progress feels distant, but at the exact moment when success becomes real and imminent. That's when the interference spikes. So why does this pattern exist? To understand that, we need to look at how the psyche constructs and maintains identity. Carl Jung observed that we build our sense of self from early experiences, specifically from how others reflected us back to ourselves. If you grew up in an environment where achievement was met with jealousy or withdrawal, where success meant losing connection, where standing out resulted in isolation, you internalized an identity. Success is dangerous. This isn't a conscious belief you can simply decide to change. It's structural. It operates below awareness. In the same way, your body regulates temperature without your conscious input. What this means is your psyche isn't sabotaging you because it's broken or weak. It's protecting you based on data it collected when you were forming your understanding of how the world works. If being visible once meant being targeted, your psyche will resist visibility even when the context has completely changed. It's still operating from that original programming. Think of it like this. Your psyche is a sophisticated survival system. Its primary job isn't to make you happy or successful. It's to keep you alive and maintain coherent functioning. When you approach a threshold that contradicts your core identity, I am someone who struggles. I am someone who doesn't finish things. I am someone who remains in the background. Your psyche interprets this as a threat to system integrity. It generates interference to restore equilibrium. Jung described this as the ego defending against material that threatens its structure. The ego isn't the enemy here. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do. Maintain consistency, predict outcomes, keep you in known territory where it understands the rules. The problem is, the ego can't distinguish between actual threats and threats to its self-concept. To your ego, both feel like danger. So when you approach success that contradicts your identity, your psyche treats it the same way it would treat a physical threat. It activates defense mechanisms. Here's how this forms. Imagine a child who excels at something and watches their sibling withdraw affection, or whose parent becomes cold when they outperform a family expectation, or who discovers that blending in is safer than standing out. That child doesn't think, "I'll avoid success to maintain connection." They simply notice what happens and adjust. The pattern becomes automatic. By the time you're an adult, you're not consciously choosing to sabotage opportunities. You're simply responding to an unconscious belief system that associates success with loss of connection, safety, or identity coherence. And here's why it persists. Every time you sabotage an opportunity, you confirm the original belief. Your psyche registers. See, we were right to be careful. Success would have been dangerous. The pattern reinforces itself. It becomes more entrenched with each repetition. This is what Jung meant when he talked about unconscious material running the show. You think you're making conscious choices, but beneath awareness, there's an entire system working to maintain the version of reality it knows how to navigate. The mechanism is elegant in its own way. Your psyche isn't trying to ruin your life. It's trying to keep you alive within the rules it learned. It just hasn't updated those rules to match your current reality. If you find something value in this video, hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to this channel. Thank you for your support. Let's look at how this plays out in the specific dynamics that tend to surround people caught in this pattern. There's a type of person who becomes uncomfortable when you move toward success, not because they're malicious, but because your growth disrupts an unspoken agreement you didn't know you'd made. Consider someone who has a close friend they've known since college. For 15 years, their friendship has been built on a particular foundation. Long conversations about struggles, mutual commiseration about careers that haven't quite launched, shared frustration about being undervalued. There's real intimacy in this, real connection. Then one of them lands a significant opportunity. Suddenly, when they mention work, the dynamic shifts. The friend who used to listen for hours now changes the subject after 2 minutes. When they share wins, their friend responds with concern rather than celebration. That sounds like so much pressure. Are you sure you're not overextending yourself? Their availability for conversation decreases. They become harder to reach. Psychology shows us this is often entirely unconscious. The friend genuinely doesn't realize they've been invested in maintaining a particular dynamic. The shared struggle was creating equilibrium. Success destabilizes it, and they're unconsciously working to restore the balance they're familiar with. Then there's the dynamic with people who've positioned themselves as helpers or mentors. They offered guidance when you were struggling. They provided support when you were uncertain. This created a role for them, the person who knows more, who has the answers, who you need. Think about someone who works with a mentor, who regularly offers career advice. The relationship is genuinely helpful for years. The mentor provides connections, shares knowledge, opens doors. But notice what happens when the person starts achieving at a level that approaches or exceeds the mentor's own position. The mentor begins qualifying their successes. Well, you got lucky with timing, or that client was already looking for someone. They start offering warnings disguised as wisdom. Be careful not to rise too fast. People will resent you. When the person shares an independent decision that works out well, the mentor becomes distant or critical. This isn't necessarily manipulation. It's the mentor's own psyche responding to a threat. Their identity has been built partly on being the one who knows more, who guides, who holds higher status. Your independence contradicts that role. Your success without their direction suggests you don't need them the way their identity requires. There's also a more subtle dynamic with family systems. Families often unconsciously assign roles that maintain homeostasis: the achiever, the struggling one, the caretaker, the one who needs support. These roles aren't written down, but everyone knows them. Consider someone who's always been the family member who needs help. They're the one with financial problems, relationship drama, career instability. The family has organized around this. Other siblings feel purpose in being stable by comparison. Parents feel needed by providing support. There's an entire system balanced around this person's struggle. Then they actually get their life together. They become financially stable. They're in a healthy relationship. Their career stabilizes. Watch what happens. The family doesn't celebrate this the way you'd expect. Instead, there's discomfort. Comments like, "Don't get too confident," or "We'll see if it lasts." Sometimes they'll even create new problems. Well, now that you're doing well, maybe you can help your sister. Or your success is making your brother feel bad about himself. The family system is unconsciously trying to pull them back into their assigned role because everyone else's identity is partly built on that role remaining constant. Jung observed this in family dynamics repeatedly. Systems resist individual transformation because transformation threatens system coherence. It's not that your family doesn't want you to succeed. It's that your success requires everyone to reorganize their sense of who they are in relation to you. That reorganization is uncomfortable, so the system generates pressure to return to what's familiar. And here's what makes this particularly complex. You internalize these dynamics. The external pressure from people who need you to stay the same combines with your own internal resistance to changing your identity. They reinforce each other. Your psyche uses their discomfort as evidence that your growth is dangerous. Their behavior confirms your unconscious belief that success means losing connection. When someone begins to understand this mechanism, something subtle but profound shifts, not in what they do, but in how they relate to their own resistance. Consider someone who's been cycling through the self-sabotage pattern for years. They start a project with enthusiasm, make progress, then find ways to derail it right before completion. They've done this enough times to recognize the pattern, but recognition hasn't stopped it from happening. Then they encounter this framework. They learn about the psyche's protective mechanisms, about identity structure, about how success can trigger defense systems. The next time they approach a threshold, the familiar interference begins. The doubts, the distractions, the sudden desire to abandon everything and start something else. But this time, they recognize what's happening. They don't fight it or shame themselves for it. They simply observe it. This is my psyche trying to protect me from identity change. It thinks success is dangerous based on old data. That recognition creates space. They continue moving forward, but now they're working with their resistance rather than being controlled by it. They expect the interference. They understand its source. It doesn't stop them because they see it for what it is: outdated protection, not truth. Notice what happens in relationships when someone embodies this understanding. They have a friend who's always responded to their successes with subtle undermining. Instead of internalizing that as evidence they should stay small, they recognize the dynamic. This person is uncomfortable with my growth because it threatens our established pattern. They don't attack the friend or defend themselves. They simply stop requiring that friend to validate their choices. They pull back their psychic energy from that dynamic. They share less about their successes with this person, not out of secrecy or resentment, but because they understand that this particular relationship isn't structured to support that aspect of their life. What happens next is predictable. The friend notices the shift. At first, they might intensify their previous behavior. More criticism, more concern trolling, more attempts to restore the old dynamic. But when they can't get the same response, The relationship either transforms or naturally fades. The person isn't making it fade. They're just no longer feeding the dynamic that kept it in its previous form. Or think about someone in a family system where they've been assigned the role of the one who struggles. They begin succeeding in ways that contradict that role. The family responds with discomfort, subtle criticism, attempts to create new problems that need their intervention. Previously, this person would have internalized the discomfort and unconsciously self-sabotage to restore equilibrium. But now they understand what's happening. They see the family system trying to maintain its structure. They don't need to rebel against it or cut everyone off. They simply stop organizing their choices around maintaining their assigned role. They share less about their successes with family members who can't celebrate them. They decline invitations to participate in dynamics that require them to be struggling. They tolerate the family's discomfort without trying to fix it. The system adjusts because they're no longer available to play the role it needs them to play. Jung described this process as individuation, becoming whole within yourself rather than remaining a fragment of collective expectations. It doesn't mean isolation. It means relating to others from a place of internal coherence rather than from the need to maintain external roles. Here's a specific example of how this shows up practically. Someone has a pattern of over-explaining their decisions to people who haven't asked for explanation. A family member questions their career move. Instead of their usual response, a 15-minute justification of why this choice makes sense, they simply say, "I've thought about it carefully. I'm comfortable with my decision." The family member pushes, "But don't you think you should consider—" They interrupt calmly, "I appreciate your concern. I've made my decision." Then they change the subject or end the conversation. This feels dramatic to them at first because they're so conditioned to managing others' feelings about their choices. But after doing it a few times, they notice something. The family member eventually stops questioning, not because they agree, but because the dynamic no longer works. There's nothing to push against. The person has become unmoved. This is what Jung meant when he talked about withdrawing projections. You stop trying to get people to see you differently. You stop needing their approval to know you're on the right path. You simply move forward based on your own clarity, and relationships reorganize around that reality. The shift isn't in becoming cold or aggressive. It's in becoming internally coherent. You're no longer split between what you want and what you think others need you to be. That integration is what others experience as strength, but it's not strength in the sense of force. It's strength in the sense of not being pulled off your foundation. This is why some people seem to move through the world without the constant second guessing that exhausts everyone else. They've integrated this understanding. They're not performing confidence. They're not faking certainty. They've simply recognized that their psyche's protective mechanisms are based on outdated information, and they've learned to move forward while those mechanisms are still activated. They sabotage themselves less because they understand the sabotage when it appears. They see the doubt, the distraction, the sudden impulse to abandon everything right before success. They recognize it as their psyche trying to maintain familiar identity structure, and they proceed anyway, not by fighting the resistance, but by understanding it doesn't have to stop them. The people around them respond differently because the dynamic has changed. They're no longer available for relationships that require them to stay small, to struggle, to need constant validation, not because they've rejected anyone, but because they've withdrawn their energy from patterns that don't serve their growth. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming whole within yourself, not needing external validation to know you're on the right path, not organizing your life around maintaining roles others need you to play, simply moving toward what's authentic for you, even when your psyche and the people around you generate interference. The sabotage doesn't disappear entirely. The resistance doesn't vanish, but you develop a different relationship with it. You see it, you understand it, you continue forward, and over time your psyche updates its data. Success doesn't destroy you. Your identity expands to accommodate your growth. The people who couldn't celebrate that growth either transform or move on, and you become the person who commands presence without effort. Not because you've mastered some technique, but because you're no longer split between who you are and who you think you should be. You're integrated. And that integration is what others experience as unshakable. Share your thoughts below on the comments section.